episode of Commercial Property Roadshow. Today we're going to talk about planning for retirement, right? And I put the word balance up here because I want you guys to know that it's all about balancing something out for your retirement. And for some people, that's more growth. Some people, that's more cash flow. Some people, it's not being stuck, right? Now, we talk a lot about yields. We've talked a lot about growth. We've talked about uplift. We've talked about, maintenance, all of this stuff around commercial property. But one of the things we haven't spoken about is planning for retirement. And one of the key things that people get stuck in retirement is that everything gets locked up in this jigsaw puzzle. Their portfolio actually becomes stagnant and they don't know how to move forward. And this typically happens somewhere where you become in your 40s and you've accumulated enough residential, maybe one or two commercial, and you're going, well, if I sell one, I might never be able to get back into the market. If I do diversify my commercial property, I'll miss out on the cash flow, I'll never get my yield back, right? You get to a point, whether that's $100,000, $250,000, $500,000 of passive income, and you actually find, yes, while you're getting income, your portfolio is actually stuck. There's nothing you can do, right? So one of the things we need to look at is this
idea of dynamic.
What does that mean? Right? And I'm a big believer on strategy, right? So everybody says, well, property is a numbers game. It's a numbers game for the property deal you're dealing with now, that you're buying today. But property investment and wealth creation is not a numbers game. It is a strategy game. It's understanding your strategy. And this is where people get it wrong. People think property is just a numbers game. As long as I stack up, I buy this property, next property, numbers stack up, I'll buy the property, and they just continue like that. And then they find themselves 10 years down the track absolutely stuck. They can't sell, they don't know and they've got constraints where they have to move around. And all of a sudden, they are not closer to their goals, right? So wealth creation is fundamentally different from property investment. Wealth creation is a strategy game. So if you are serious about creating wealth, listen to how you should develop and study how you should develop building up portfolios. And that is where my specialty comes in, because I've spent countless hours designing other people's portfolios, studying them, understanding what makes wealthy people wealthy, because I understood how portfolios are done. So what you need in your portfolio as you are transitioning to retirement is that you need to have your cash flow properties, foundation properties set in, right? These are the properties that you've made good to great, right? Good to great. So you bought it when it was a good property. You've made it great in the time you've owned it, whether that's 1, 2, 5, or 10 years. Those are your foundation properties that's always going to deliver cash flow. Never going to be too much vacancy. They're always going to deliver some cash flow. Then you've got maybe a few residential properties where you need to identify when you're going to exit that property, right? And when you exit, what are you going to do with that growth? Is it paying down your foundation property, or is it going into another property, right? If you are looking for a lifestyle, there should be properties there that you are always moving in the market to keep your portfolio dynamic. And the reason for that is, and this is where you realize whether you focus on a $300,000 property or a $3 million property. If you're earning $500K a year, right? Don't buy a $500,000 property. You need to buy $1.5 million to $2.5 million properties foundation in your portfolio as a minimum, right? If you're earning $50,000 a year, don't buy $150,000 or $200,000 property. Reach for the 500 to 700K properties to the 1.2 mil properties. That's where you need to reach to, because these properties are going to be long-term longevity in your portfolio, right? That is what you're searching for. You need to, at retirement, come up with a scenario where you go, these are my foundation cash flow. These are my movement cash flow. So what does that mean? It means I've invested into an area. Let's say that, for example, I invested into Rockhampton in 2016. And in 2019, the market starts to move. And during COVID, we've seen a 9% traditional town compressed to a 7% town, right? That 2% compression means that I should sell that property, move it to another property, and that might be, let's say, parts of Cairns, might be in parts of Mackay. Maybe it would mean coming back down into Albury-Wodonga, right? Moving it into another town that's delivering higher yields but haven't had the compression yet. So this way, when I've sold out, I've moved to a town, maybe potentially the town could be a better, more secure town, and I'm picking up just as much cash flow, but I've also now laid another egg, right? What does that mean? That means that the property I might have bought for $1 million in 2016 is now, with the yield compression and rental increases and what I've done with the property, is now worth, say, $1.3, $1.4 million. And now I can go away and take this property and go and buy a $1.4 million property somewhere else, or I can go and buy $1 million and a $400,000 property. So I can actually take my property and split it into two, which gives my property portfolio diversification, but more
the dynamics of that property.
So it needs to be able to shift and weave and turn around. That is what's so key to your retirement, because when you retire, you need to do three things with your portfolio. First, it needs to be cash flow. Secondly, you need to have movability. So what property in that portfolio moves around, right? And number three, you need to look at what you have in residential, what you're going to sell off, what are you going to keep, anything that you want to be willable, any equity you want to extract straight away before you retire, and what are you going to sell gradually over that time, because that's a capital gains taxation you need to treat it as. And that's probably when you retire, you're probably going to get the best tax incentives, right? So that is what traditionally happens. And if you can move these pieces where you have a cash flow, where you know you can sleep at night, you've got pieces where you're moving and you're still gaining some traction in terms of getting cash flow and growth, plus you've got the resi side where you are going to be able to know that when you're selling out, maybe to do more projects, maybe to put money into your super, maybe to give it to the kids as a deposit, you actually continue to move in retirement. Because one of the things that often happens is people are too scared to sell in retirement because they're so locked in, right? If they sell, they end up losing out. They end up, losing out later on, because the fact is the cost of living is growing, right? And the cost of living growing, meaning that, it's going to be $10 or $12 for a loaf of bread in the future, right? So you need a portfolio that doesn't have stagnation in terms of rental growth. And property prices are going to grow. If you are going to go to a retirement village, if you are going to go to over 55 housing, or perhaps you're going to sell your principal home and downsize to somewhere else, and you want to travel, right? You're going to need some kind of income, medical insurance, all of that thing's going to come into play. So you need a portfolio that still grows and evolves with you in time, right? And that is coming to designing that portfolio 5, 7, 10 years ahead of your retirement. Having the foresight to go, yes, this property at the moment might be giving me 6%, but by the time I retire, it's going to give me 8% plus a 50% or 70% growth in that time. And that is worthwhile me holding it right now, right? Or I need to chase 9% when the market compresses. I'm going to get my growth and then I'm going to sell, right? To understand how that moves, right? And that comes from a development point of view of developing out a portfolio. And that's one of the biggest things that I study and look at all the time. How the rich got rich. They didn't just trigger happily, bought. What they did was they implemented strategy. So if you want to do that, retirement planning is a big thing. And I know that there's financial planners who look at bonds and shares and everything else, but property has never been one of those properties that fluctuate. One of the things you buy today and sell it tomorrow. It's always been implement the right strategies, sit back, accumulate, get the growth, and you'll be better off for it. And also then building the cash flow component onto it. So that's where commercial really comes in. And the more you are on the other side of 50, the better commercial is for you, because banks stop wanting to lend you money for residential. It's now a cash flow game. But now,
how do you make your cash flow dynamic?
Is the planning, right? So you need to get the balance of both growth and cash flow. You need to start out with properties that are probably slightly higher risk on the spectrum. Like, say, for example, you might be going to somewhere like a Mackay where it's an agriculture and a mining town, right? I'm not saying going to Emerald. I'm not saying to go to Mount Isa. I'm not saying WA in Kalgoorlie. I'm not saying all of those mining towns, but Mackay's probably as far as you're going to go. Or potentially you can go inland on a Sunshine or a Gold Coast, or even inland in regional Victoria or New South Wales, right? Those areas are going to present high risk but higher yields. But over time, as you develop out your portfolio and as the markets change, you want to sell out in those areas and bring them back into a more metro area to reduce your risk. Because when you retire, you want to reduce your risk, you want to have stable cash flow, you want to still maintain growth, and you want to be able to maneuver your portfolio, a certain percentage of your portfolio still around in terms of your property, so that you can continue to evolve with the times, right? So again, I do a lot with portfolio building, strategy, and that I see is one of the fundamental things to create wealth through property. So if that's what you're interested in, reach out to me, helentarrant.com, helen@unicorn.com.au. Let us help you build a cash flow rich and a balanced portfolio. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell, and I'll see you at one of my next events and also on the next video. Bye for now.